So this is the second video of the book The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boehm. So today I am not in webcam because of few problems. So I have shared the link of order and PDF link in the last video, and I will also share in this video. So you can have homework as that links. So the second chapter is the new house. When he first saw a new house, Bruno's eyes opened wide, his mouth made the shape of an O, and his arms spread out at his sides once again. Everything about it seemed to be the exact opposite of their old home, and he couldn't believe that they were really going to live there. The house of Berlin had stood on a quiet street, and alongside it were a handful of other big houses like his own. And it always nice to look at them because they were almost the same as his house but not quite, and other boys lived in them who he played with or steered clear of. The new house, however, stood all on its own in an empty, desolate place, and there were no other houses anywhere to be seen, which meant there would be no other families around and no other boys to play with, neither friends nor trouble. The house of Berlin was enormous, and even though he'd lived there for 9 years, he was still be able to find nooks and crannies that he hadn't fully finished exploring yet. There were even whole rooms, such as father's office, which was out of bounds at all times and no exceptions. They that he had barely been inside. However, the new house had only 3 floors. A top floor where all 3 bedrooms were, and only one bathroom, a ground floor and a kitchen, a dining room and a new office for father, which he presumed had the same restrictions as the old one, and a basement where the servants slept. All around the house in Berlin were other streets of larger houses, and when you walk towards the center of town, where there are always people strolling along and stopping to chat to each other or rushing around and saying that they had no time to stop, not today, not when they had 101 thing to do. There were shops with bright storefronts and fruits and vegetable stalls with big trays piled high with cabbages, carrots, cauliflower, and corn. Some were overspilling with leeks and mushrooms, turnips and sprouts, others with lettuce and green beans, courgettes, and parsnips. Sometimes he liked to stand in front of these stalls and look and close his eyes and breathe in their aromas, feeling his head grow dizzy with the mixed scents of sweetness and life. But there were no other streets around the new house, no one strolling along or rushing around, and definitely no shops or fruits and vegetable stalls. When he closed his eyes, everything around him just felt empty and cold, as if he was the loneliest place in the world, in the middle of nowhere. In Berlin, there had been tables set out on the street, and sometimes when he walked home from school with Carl, Daniel, and Martin, there would be men and women sitting at them, drinking frothy drinks and laughing loudly. The people who sat at these tables must be very funny people, he always thought, because it didn't matter what they said, somebody always laughed. But there was something about the new house that made Bruno think that no ever laughed there, that there was nothing to laugh at and nothing to be happy about. I think this was a bad idea, said Bruno a few hours after they arrived while Maria was unpacking her suitcase upstairs. Maria wasn't the only maid at the new house either. There were 3 others who were quite skinny and only ever spoke to each other in whispering voice. There was an old man too who he was told was there to prepare the vegetables every day and wait on them at the dinner table, and who looked very unhappy but also a little angry. "We don't have the luxury of thinking," said mother, opening a box that contained the set of 64 glasses that grandfather and grandmother had given her when she married father. "Some people make all the decisions for us." Bruno didn't think what she meant by that, so he pretended that she'd never said it at all. "I think this was a bad idea," he repeated. "I think the best thing to do would be to forget all about this and just go back home. We can chalk it up to experience." He added a phrase he had learned recently and was determined to use as often as possible. Mother smiled and put the glass down carefully on the table. "I have another phrase for you," she said. "It's that we have to make the best of a bad situation." "Well, I don't know that we do," said Bruno. "I think you should just tell your father that you changed your mind, and, well, if we have to stay here for the rest of the day and have dinner here this evening and sleep here tonight because we're all tired, then that's alright, but we should probably get up early in the morning if we are to make it back to Berlin by tea time tomorrow." Mother said, "Bruno, why don't you just go upstairs and help Maria unpack?" she asked. "But there's no point unpacking if we are only going." "Bruno, just do it please," snapped Mother, because apparently it was alright if she interrupted him, but it didn't work the other way round. Where he Here we've arrived. This is our home for the foreseeable future, and we just have to make the best of things. Do you understand me?" He didn't understand what the foreseeable future meant and told her so. "It means that this is where we live now," Bruno said, "Mother, and that's an end to it." Bruno had a pain in his stomach and could feel something growing inside him, something that when it worked its way up from the lowest depths inside him to, to the outside world, would make him shout and scream that the whole thing was wrong and unfair, and a big mistake for which somebody would pay one of these days, or just make him burst into tears instead. He couldn't understand how this bad had all come about. One day he was perfectly content playing at home, having three best friends for life, sliding down banisters, trying to stand on his tiptoes to see right across the room. Well, now he was stuck here in this cold, nasty house with their whispering maids and waiter, who was both unhappy and angry, where no one looked as if they could ever be cheerful again. "Bruno, I want you to go upstairs and unpack, and I want you to do it now," said Mother in unfriendly voice, and he knew that she meant business, so he turned round and marched away without another word. He could feel tears springing up behind his eyes, but he was determined that he wouldn't allow them to appear. He went upstairs and turned slowly around in a full circle, hoping he might find a small door or cubbyhole where a decent amount of exploration could eventually be done. But there wasn't one. On his floor, there were just four doors, two on either side, facing each other: a door into his room, a door into Gretel's room, a door into Mother's and Father's room, and a door into the bathroom. "This isn't home. This isn't home, and it never will be," he muttered under his breath, and as he went through his own door to find all his clothes scattered on the bed and the boxes of toys and books not even unpacked yet, it was obvious that Maria did not have her priorities right. "Mother sent me to help," he said quietly, and Maria nodded and pointed towards a big bag that contained all his socks and vests and underpants. "If you thought that loved you could put them in the chest of drawers over there," she said, pointing towards an ugly chest that stood across the room beside a mirror that was covered in dust. Bruno sighed and opened the bag. It was full to the brim with the underwear, and he wanted nothing more than to crawl inside it and hope that when he climbed out again, he'd have woken up and be back home again. What do you think of all this, Maria? He asked after a long silence because he had always liked Maria and felt as if she was one of the family. Even though father said she was just a maid and overpaid at that. All what? She said. This, he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world coming to a place like this. Don't you think we made a big mistake? That's not for me to say, Master Boone, said Maria. Your mother has explained to you about your father's job, and oh, I am tired of hearing about father's job, said Bruno, interrupting her. That's all we ever hear about. If you ask me, father's job and father's job that well, if father's job means that we have to move away from our house and the sliding banister and my three best friends for life, then I think should think twice about his job, father. Don't you? Just at the moment, there was a creak outside in the hallway, and Bruno looked up to see the door of mother and father's room opening slightly. He froze, unable to move for a moment. Mother was still downstairs, which meant that father was there, and he might have heard everything that Bruno had just said. He watched the door, hardly daring to breath, wondering whether father might come through it and take him downstairs for a serious talking to. The door opened wider and Bruno stepped back as a figure appeared, but it wasn't father. It was a much younger man and not as tall as father either, but he wore the same type of uniform, only without as many decorations on it. He looked very serious and his cap was secured tightly on his head around his temples. Bruno could see that he had very blondy hair and almost a natural shade of yellow. He was carrying a box in his hands and walking towards the staircase, but he stopped for a moment when he saw Bruno standing there watching him. He looked the boy up and down as if he had never seen a child before and wasn't quite sure what he was supposed to do with one. Eat it, ignore it, or kick it downstairs. Instead, he gave Bruno a quick nod and continued on his way. Who was there? Bruno asked. The young man had seemed so serious and busy that he assumed he must be someone very important. One of your father's soldiers, I suppose, said Maria, who had stood up very straight when the young man appeared and held her hands before her like a prayer. She had stared down at the ground rather at his face, as if she was afraid she might be turned to stone if she looked directly at him. She only relaxed when he had gone. We'll get to know him then in time. I don't think I like him, said Bruno. He was too serious. Your father is very serious too, said Maria. Yes, ex- but father, but he is the father. Sorry. Explained Bruno. Fathers are supposed to be serious. It doesn't matter whether they're green brokers or teachers or chiefs or commandants, he said, listening all the jobs that he know decent respectable fathers did and whose title he had thought about 1,000 times, and I don't think that man looked like a father. Although he was very serious, that's for sure. Well, they have very serious jobs, said Maria with a sigh. Or so they think anyway. But if I was you, I'd steer clear of the soldiers. I don't see what else there is to do other than that, said Bruno sadly. I don't even think there's going to be anyone to play with other than Gretel, and what fun is that after all? She's a hopeless case. He felt as if he was about to cry again but stopped himself, not wanting to look like a baby in front of Maria. He looked around the room without fully lifting his eyes up from the ground. trying to see whether there was anything of interest to be found. There wasn't, or there didn't seem to be. But then one thing caught his eye. Over in the corner of the room opposite the door, there was a window in the ceiling that stretched down into the wall, a little like the one on the top floor of the house in Berlin, only not so high. Bruno looked at it and thought that he might be able to see out without even having stand on tiptoes. He walked slowly towards it, hoping that from here he might able be to see all the way back to Berlin and his house and the street around it and the tables where the people sat and drank their fruity drinks and told each other hilarious stories. He walked slowly because he didn't want to be disappointed. But if it was just a small boy's room and there was only so far he could walk before he arrived at the window, he put his face to the glass and saw what was out there. And this time, when his eyes opened wide and his mouth made a shape of O, his hand stayed by his side because something made him feel very cold and unsafe. So this chapter ends at the page 21. So we have read 21 pages in 2 episodes. And the next episode will be of the next chapter, the hopeless case. The next chapter will be followed in some days. So stay tuned, like, share, and subscribe.